points. Now, the markets themselves across the board have certainly been quite negative of late. That China-US trade story has certainly been in the news and been the focus point for many. But with no deal in sight, it seems that the markets have taken a lead from that and headed negative. As you can see, the FTSE 100 out in London going down there, while the DAX of Germany going down as well. The CAC 40 still firmly above that 5,000 point mark, but certainly still in negative territory. On the local front, however, markets as well have been faced with some sense of negativity. There was some positive sentiment, however, on Friday as the elections began to wrap up and we saw a clearer picture of how things would fare. For now, the JSE All Share is up near that 57,000 point mark. The industrials, however, going a little bit lower. Consider that Naspers is in that counter there. And of course, with Asia going down this morning, its subsidiary Tencent suffered just a touch. So that fell off as well. Across the other in sectors as well there, the resources managing to go up today as gold counters went down. The search for yield, of course, in those safe haven assets, however, not as steady as one would have liked. So your commodity picture is sitting as follows: $1,283 a fine ounce for gold, platinum at $855. That oil price having gone a whole lot higher, of course, there with regards to that China-US story, and the United States seeing a third week of losses when it comes to its oil rigs as well there that are working, sent that price a little bit lower. Thus far, still above that $71 a barrel mark. 14.27, a slightly better mark for South Africa's currency when it comes to compared to earlier last week. And of course, we saw that come through as well in sense of positivity after the ANC's win with regards to the elections. But it is slightly weaker for now for today. 18.58 for a pound and a euro, setting you back 18 rand and 58 cents. Let's give you context to this now. How exactly have markets performed? What exactly has happened today? Gary Boyson is from Ransus and he joins us live from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange as we get more sentiments with regard to this. Gary, of course, the big ideal issue has just been about that China-US trade story. No resolution as yet. Is that good or bad, should we say?
Well, it's certainly not a good thing. I think everyone's hoping that there can be some sort of resolution. So the way that we're seeing it is there's really three scenarios that could potentially play out. We could either get a quick resolution, in which case you shouldn't see too much interruption to international trade. Up until this point, we've had general international trade flows not shifting significantly, and that's because the tariffs that have been put in place so far have been fairly easy to circumnavigate. It hasn't been a broad-based tariff on all Chinese imports to the US. It's been a very specific set of goods and services, and in that way, there are ways around the taxes. With what's being discussed at the moment, where you're going to get this broad-based tariff across all Chinese goods, and as of Friday, they've now moved up the 10% level to 25% on the $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, and they're now looking at implementing further tariffs on another $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. We're also waiting for Chinese reaction to these tariffs as well. That's going to make it far more difficult for China to, or at least for international trade flows to proceed. So the second scenario really is that we do see a protracted negotiations and no speedy resolution. And what we'll see there is certainly the flow of goods and services across international borders is going to decrease. If we see a significant escalation, which is our third scenario, there's a very, very strong potential that we'll go into a global recession. Definitely not this year, but certainly certainly looking out to 2020, 2021. That's if we get a sharp escalation in tariffs and a full-blown trade war. So it's certainly concerning. I think markets are struggling to realize how to price this. And obviously we've got Chinese markets and global markets really under pressure as investors get a little bit more nervous.
There was always a sense of positivity, though, that ultimately they'll reach some sort of conclusion. Then Donald Trump decided to tweet that we have to find a solution by Friday. That has clearly not happened. And yes, it does send consumers as well into some sort of tailspin, with a family of four having to fork out around $783 US more per year with regards to this as this sanction comes in place. But is the US market ready for these sanctions? Have they perhaps priced in too much of a resolution and have said we will get one and have forgotten a bit about the negativity that could come through here?
I think that's definitely the sense that we're feeling. That if you look at I suppose the equity market reaction, just the general financial market reaction that we've seen for most of 2019, it has been a very complacent, very I suppose equity market certainly positive risk on kind of attitude that we've been facing, which is it is surprising given the fact that I suppose the quantum of the damage that could potentially unfold should this trade war really start to escalate. So certainly I think markets were pricing in a resolution. The kind of comments that we're seeing out of the US administration now, and I suppose the reaction that we're seeing out of the Chinese news outlets as well, certainly this is starting to escalate, which is very, very concerning. And I think that's why you're seeing markets starting to come off. Something this on this scale is very, very difficult for financial markets to price in, and it's just I think the uncertainty currently that's helping to drag some of the markets lower. As you mentioned in the opening, this will affect things like Naspers. We actually had Hong Kong closed today for, I think it's the day after Buddha's birthday.
Yes,
public holiday in Hong Kong, and that's so that market wasn't trading. But certainly I think the counters that we're really seeing this unfold in are some of the US chip makers, the likes of AMD, Intel, who have large I suppose trade ties to China, and that seems to be where the market is playing out their views on what's going to happen around the trade negotiations.
Gary, let's come locally very quickly then as well. We had earnings out of Vodacom. It's a bit of a mixed picture there, right? So you had the BEE deal of around 16.4 billion rand there. They invested 13 billion rand in the business. And I got to chat to the CEO a little bit earlier, and he said, they've done enough to sort of move themselves forward, but they're going into so many other industries, the likes of Internet of Things. They've got a partnership with Amazon as well. Are you finding that they're perhaps focusing on too many other things and losing out in their core business? And do you expect Vodacom to perhaps maintain a sense of strong growth when it comes to subscriber numbers?
So it's interesting. I think their core business is changing, and that's really the issue, and it's why Vodacom's reaching for all these different businesses. So we could see it in the data revenue this time around. Data revenue under enormous amount of pressure as prices fell. At the same time, we're seeing subscribers increase, but the overall headline revenue numbers for headline earnings numbers, at least for Vodacom, declining. Part of it because of the BE transaction, but also because of a very, very soft environment in South Africa. It's really the international businesses that have managed to lift them, and as you mentioned, they're looking at moving into the Internet of Things through a partnership with IoT.nxt. They're also looking at obviously the rolling out the M-Pesa mobile money platform more fully into Africa. So there's a lot of different businesses on the go. I suppose the issue at the moment is that from our point of view, telcos at least are becoming more a utility business, and if they don't get these more speculative acquisitions right, if they don't get their business strategy right and manage to achieve things in these new business ventures, it's going to be a rocky ride for shareholders. At the moment, however, while we did see the dividend coming off slightly, there's going to be a special dividend in the next interims, which was announced thanks to a payment from the Safaricom acquisition. So a little bit of good news for shareholders. It's I think helping to lift the stock on the day. It was up 4% at one point, but certainly Vodacom a very different proposition from today than the Vodacom that we had say 5-10 years ago.
Very quickly, 2 words: MTN or Vodacom?
For me, still MTN.
All right. Good stuff. Gary Boyson there from Rand Swiss giving us that update, of course, on that market picture. Speaking of Vodacom, of course, we will chat to the CEO just after this. I did get to speak to him a little bit earlier on. You get to see exactly what we spoke about and just how things have fared with